I guess the way I think about it is like your position, it might change a little bit if you build a new product or you uncover that there's a new type of customer you can sell to that you didn't account for when you first started going to market. You may realize like, oh, wow, I'm in a marketplace. I can position myself to both buyers and sellers in that marketplace. I think we see that happen a lot in like vertical SaaS. Like, if you're like on a firm, like one of these buy now, pay laters, like you can sell to both the retailer as well as the bank that wants to help issue the loan, as well as like, maybe the platform.
And I like that you put positioning before messaging.
Yeah.
It's where it belongs, because if you can't really develop a message and then figure out how do I position that, you have to start with the positioning and where is it that it's going to be, how are we going to show up, and then what's the message that supports that.
Yeah. And that iterates over time. Like your position, I guess the way I think about it is like your position, it might change a little bit if you build a new product or you uncover that there's a new type of customer you can sell to that you didn't account for when you first started going to market. And so you may realize like, oh, wow, I'm in a marketplace. I can position myself to both buyers and sellers in that marketplace. I think we see that happen a lot in like vertical SaaS. Like, if you're like on a firm, like one of these buy now, pay laters, like you can sell to both the retailer as well as the bank that wants to help issue the loan, as well as like, maybe the platform. If you're in the advertising technology business, like you could sell to both publishers, people who sell ads, as well as advertisers, people who buy them.
Right.
And your position might shift a little bit as you realize like, oh, wow, I'm actually in a different spot. Your message will definitely shift.
Yeah.
The frequency of message is going to shift quite a bit. And I think it's important to just sort of like keep that in the back of your mind as you go and experiment, even from call to call, like conversation to conversation.
Yeah. Well, it seems like the positioning is really around the problem they're solving, because the advertisers are solving one problem, and then the people who are selling, that have the ad platforms, they're solving another problem. And so it's really making sure that you have that alignment. You're right, the messaging is going to be completely different.
Yeah.
As a company evolves, I mean, how often should companies revisit their messaging and positioning, especially in fast-moving markets like SaaS?
I don't think there's like a great answer for how often, but here's what I would say. If you haven't gotten to a point where when you share your story, like whether that's a sales pitch or your vision pitch, like if you're going out and pitching investors, it's a very different pitch than if you're pitching customers.
Yes.
Because they're both buying very different things from you. One's buying, sort of a piece of equity and stake in your company. The other one's buying the product that you create. If you aren't getting heads nodding, and you aren't getting people smiling and repeating, yeah, I totally get it. Oh, you nailed it. Oh, you said it. You have to keep trying. It's almost like you're in the music studio and like you haven't quite figured out the hit yet. Like you haven't boiled it down to the thing that's going to cause the wallets to open up and the money to come out of them. And so if you're small, and I would say like less than 10 million, you probably want to be doing it like deal to deal, trying new stuff, especially if you're the founder. I think it's a little bit different if you're a salesperson. If you're a salesperson who's doing this, hopefully you're one that's got some of this range. Like you are like very good naturally at storytelling and you sort of have some of those product marketing genes. As you get bigger, the way that most folks think about it is like product release to product release. Like if you're releasing a new product or an upgraded feature, or there's some case study you can talk about, you're sort of thinking about the campaign alongside that. So maybe that happens a couple of times a year.
Yeah.
But in terms of likelihood, like what's the probability that somebody who's listening to this podcast would say, how often should I do it? The likelihood is more that like you haven't found resonance yet. So like you should be doing it constantly and obsessing about it all day. Like what's the market opportunity and what's the story that I'm going to tell in that market that makes me sound different than everybody else?